Good evening again. July 17. Boy, time is moving on. It's just amazing. We're past the halfway of summer. If you think about it that way. So
we're less than a month now.
Yeah,
students coming back.
Students coming back. Yeah, no,
So-
I'm thinking that. I'm just like, wow. It's just like it's crazy. It was like a couple weeks ago was July 4, and we're already, boom, you snap your fingers and you're gone as far as time.
Well, I'm kind of excited we're able to do this tonight because normally you'd be all filled up with camping stuff.
That's true. This year it's a little different.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have it. They're quarantined. So, all right, we welcome you to another episode of Sundown Surmisings. And this next, again, we're doing this sort of four-part favorite stories, favorite parables. And this, we're going to turn to a favorite parable of PJ's.
Yep.
And it's going to be one you're familiar with. It's going to be in the chapter 20 of Matthew. And I'm kind of excited. I'm not sure where. I read it because I wanted to know what you're doing, but I'm kind of looking forward to where we're going to go with it. So if you have your Bibles, Matthew chapter 20. Tell me about why this story.
Well, I think it's so interesting that we live in a world that, you have children.
Yeah.
And you have children kind of like I have children. We have the close in age.
Yep.
And then we have our third one is further down,
Yeah.
So I think about 7 years. But I was raised with my brother very close in age. For you were kind of that end.
I'm at the end of the, yeah.
Exactly, so it's a little bit different, in the relationship a little bit different, but we're always about, in families, like, what's fair?
What's fair? What's equal?
Yeah, what's
how
equal?
How come they got this, and
Exactly.
how come I didn't, whatever. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And you and I work with teenagers, and that is a glorious passion and ministry and occupation. I love that we get to be educators.
Well, they have a strong sense of justice.
They do. Absolutely.
Sometimes we think they're being nitpicky. Well, how come, you do it to one, you can do it to all, and it's like, but it's because they have a strong sense of what's right or what's fair.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been talking this month a little bit kind of about liberty.
Yeah.
About justice, about fairness. Yeah. And so this story kind of brings that out more so, but it kind of flips on its heel.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you have to think a little bit.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we talked about the last number of weeks, last week with Acts 17, and then also before that with the leper from Mark 1, is that God is trying to teach us something.
Yeah.
That every single one of us are valuable and important.
That's true. That's a consistent theme.
It is. And so this story brings out, so let's go there.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 20. And the really focused part is verses 13 through 16, but I'm going to guess we're going to read a little more context behind it.
Well, why don't you give us the background of the story? Why don't you set the story for us?
Jesus is telling a story, Matthew chapter 20, and he's doing a whole series in 19 and 20, especially in 20, and he did some in chapter 6. Matthew has the whole kingdom of heaven is like.
Yeah, that's correct.
We always think of Luke as having parables, and Luke does have parables, but Luke's parables are more personal parables, like you have especially Luke 15. You think about the shepherd and the coin and the prodigal son and stuff. But Jesus' parables in Matthew 20 focus specifically on what is heaven like. What's in heaven like? It seems to be the question everybody wants to ask. Well, you say you're there. What's it like? What's it like? And the kingdom of heaven is like, and the kingdom of heaven is like, and the kingdom of heaven is like. And he starts with the kingdom of heaven is like a guy who had a field and people needed to work in it.
I always kind of thought about this, and it's interesting that you point that out a little bit, because I always thought of Matthew as being the object lesson, the kingdom is like, and Luke, as you pointed out just now, being more of the storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
The storyteller, like you said, the story and stuff, but these are the object lessons.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a good way to think it. Kind of boiled down. So Jesus is trying to tell him, and this is Matthew 20, so we're only a few chapters off from the end of his ministry,
correct,
ministry life, period. And in fact, you're coming up to a couple chapters that are pretty painful, where he has to address the Pharisees as hypocrites and stuff, and it doesn't go over well, and he's pained, but people are beginning to ask, so what do you have to do to get in this kingdom, and what's it like? And so he's like, okay, how do I break it down to you what it's about? It's not about power and privilege. It's about perseverance and serving.
Correct.
And that's what I care about. So he tells a story of a guy who owns a big field that needs work. And he starts, and he goes out, to the marketplace, and sometimes maybe you've been to this, maybe you've been at a Home Depot,
Yes.
right? And you see people hanging out that are looking for jobs for the day, right? And somebody might come through and say,
Can you
hey,
help
I
me?
need, and I'll pay you such and such. And maybe gets some, but maybe not enough. Maybe comes back later, and that's what's happening. You have the guy comes by and he picks up people at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then he comes back again at 7 o'clock and picks some more, and then 8
And the
o'clock,
wage is
9
agreed
o'clock,
upon.
and he says, okay, work for me and I'll pay what's fair. Work for me and I'll pay what's fair. Work for me and I'll pay what's fair. He doesn't say what it is. Just, and the guy's, all right, awesome. And everybody keeps coming into work. And they come in at 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. He still needs work.
Yeah.
And it's not getting done because he's got to get it done at 6 o'clock. Right?
Correct.
12th hour.
Yep.
6 to 6. And he's like, man, I still need
more
people.
help.
And he comes in at the 11th hour, it's called, and he hired, he says, I'll pay you, and King James says a penny, it's a day's wage, and that's where our story's going to pick up, because everybody's lining up to get paid, he pays the people who came in last, he pays them first.
Yep.
So the people who came in last, he pays them first, and so he's going to pay the people first, last. And they're watching and going, oh, you got a penny? Oh, all right. I mean, I worked twice, right? You worked for 1 hour, you got 1 penny. I worked for 2 hours, I should get 2. You worked for 1 hour, you got a penny.
Right.
I worked for 3 hours, I should get 3.
And remember, he did not tell them what he was going to give them.
No.
And so you're right, and that's how we do sometimes. We look at what other people in front of us or what's happening, and we think, okay, that's going to be part of my journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if they got that, I should get that. Or what's fair for them should be the same for me. If it's going to be fair,
Right.
And the same and equal are two different things
Very-
in this
very
parable.
different, yes,
In this
yeah.
parable specifically.
Okay.
Verse 12.
Let's go to 9. Let's start
Okay,
there. I think
all right.
that would be a great place.
When they came that were hired at the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. And when the first came, they supposed that they should be receiving more.
Mm-hmm.
But they also got a penny. And they that had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, verse 12, hey, these last, they only worked 1 hour. And again, I think it's important to focus on the word, because they're not actually talking to the guy directly. They're
Right.
complaining about him behind his back. They're like, these guys only worked for 1 hour, and these guys made him equal. But we worked the heat of the day. And he answered one of them. And again, the King James doesn't do the justice. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Right.
And he calls him friend. Eros in the Greek. I do thee no wrong. Didn't you agree to work for me for a penny?
Now, this takes us back to verse 2.
Mm-hmm.
If we jump over there, we'll see that after agreeing with the workers on 1 denarius.
Mm-hmm. For a day.
For a day, yep.
Right?
So, then he brings us, and he comes back to 13 and read that for us.
Yeah. Well, because that's the only one where he gives the price. Because after that, it's always, I'll give you what's right, I'll give you what's
That's
right,
right,
I'll give you what's
correct.
right, right? Verse 13 then, I did no wrong. Didn't you agree with me for a penny? And they had. Take what's yours and go your way. I will give unto the last, even as unto you. Is it not lawful for me to do what is I want with mine own? If your eye is evil, wait, let's try that again. Is your eye evil just because I'm good? In other words, are you looking at me as bad just because of what I did was good, but it's my call?
Right.
So the first should be last and last first. And there's the context for that famous verse.
So 13 says, in my Bible says,
Mhm.
friend, I'm doing you no wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you agree with me on a denarius or a penny, as you
Mhm.
mentioned? Take what's yours and go. I want to give this last man the same as I gave you.
Right.
Don't have the right to do what I want with what is
Mine.
mine. Are you jealous? This concept is such a hard one for us
Yeah.
to get.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine, let's say, Deg, that, remember a couple weeks ago, we had Dean Grady with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? And
Yeah.
and we agree upon that we're going to have ice cream together.
Yeah.
And I walk in and I give you an ice cream with a cone, with a one on it, and I bring him a sundae,
Right.
a whole bowl. Now, for them watching, they would wonder, wait a minute,
That doesn't seem fair.
that doesn't seem right. Then we start assuming that I like Daniel better,
Or-
and I know that you like to exercise a lot and stay healthy, so I'm giving you less. But no one, but people looking don't see
Might
that.
not, yeah.
And what I think that I love about what Jesus is trying to say is that for you and I, and for me, I have been and you mentioned this last week, and I love. Tell me what you said about being a Christian with your life. You said that you have.
It's a tagline on my phone. So if you get a message from me on my phone, look down. It says, "Christianity is not a part of my life. My life is a part of Christianity."
What I love about that concept is the idea that, for me, I've been an Adventist Christian. I've been a Christ follower. I'll say that since my teens.
Right.
But yet the person who comes to Jesus today gets the same.
Yeah.
Gets the same connection, gets to go to the same spot in the house, gets to have the same seat in the car.
Yeah, that is a little tough for us because we feel like, how many times and I don't know if it's necessarily all churches, but certainly Raises have been it's most of my life, we have our space in church.
Yes.
We have our pew, as if we own it, right? Or it's our, that's true. That's true.
Well, and it kind of goes that we talk about sometimes those idioms or things that what's greener on the side of the fence is like this story teaches me that I need to stand my side of the fence.
Yeah.
That I need to praise God for what He's given me.
Yeah.
That I need to do my work that He's called me to, or I've agreed to.
Or like sometimes I've heard you say, "Stay in your lane."
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Or your seat on the bus.
Yeah.
Right. And we sometimes are like, well, that person's your seat on the. This is your, And I think there's some of that same thing. Like you'll see in John chapter 21, when Peter's like, "What about that guy?" And Jesus like, "None of your business."
Yeah.
And I think this is Jesus saying, this is our relationship.
Right.
Don't worry about anybody else.
Well, I think it just comes to the point that this is important for us to remember that God sees us, gives us to our journey, and that they still got paid.
Yeah.
They still were valued.
They didn't get cheated.
No.
They didn't somehow. He didn't rob from them. They still earned what he had promised.
Now I wanted to ask you, and this is one of the reasons I want to bring this up with you and I talking together. So give me some little insights into that last verse, that last idea, because I think sometimes I want the last to be first, but you go ahead and do it. You be the last one.
Yeah.
So the last will be first, and the first last.
I gotta tell you, I struggle trying to understand sometimes. I think sometimes I don't mean Jesus tries to be obscure, but my head is pretty thick on some of this. And the people who came last were just overjoyed. Right?
They got an opportunity.
Wow, this is awesome!
Yeah.
And the only people who were complaining were the people who were first. Because it was the person who was first was the only time he agreed for a price.
Right.
After that, I'll pay what's right. And I think the contrast is between the most likely to come into the kingdom will be those who are grateful for what they got, instead of trying to harp over whether it was fair or just. Because he says, "This is what I offered. Nothing more, nothing less." I won't say take it away, that sounds kind of harsh, but the people at the end of the day were like, "That's great." But it was only the person at the end who was in fact the same price that he'd agreed upon, who said, "Yeah, that's fair, I'll do that." And then suddenly he's like, "Well, that's not fair anymore."
Right. Well, certainly an interesting concept, and the thing that I think my takeaway from the story is the idea that God loves each one of us, and His blessings, His power, His grace is for each one of us.
Yeah.
And whether I started when I was young, or I find that blessing at the 11th hour,
whenever I show up, He's still waiting for me.
He's still waiting for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me take you through this parable. I appreciate that.
It's a great parable, and it is one of the more tough for us to kind of work through. I hope you learned something new. When we go through the kind of journey, it's always good for us too. It's not like we have some sort of inside expertise. So if you have questions or comments or observations or feedback, send it to us. dgregory@montereyacademy.org or principal@montereybayacademy.org. And next week, Sundown Surmisings, we're going to look also in the book of Matthew at two stories, because one's only a verse long, and we'll see they're paired together.
Okay.
That's when we're going to close out our stuff on July, and then by the time August rolls around, the kids are coming in, so we got to look at something else. So, all right, we'll see you again next week for Sundown Surmisings. Thank you.
Bye.